All right, friends, we're going to get started. We're going to get going. And I'm excited for today because we together are going to be looking at comparing and analyzing A Charlie Brown Christmas and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, two of the classics in the last 50 years, 60 years almost, since they came out. So it's been, to me, two of the most important parts of my holiday preparations is watching either of these, and it's been a joy to introduce my children to them. And we are in a long line of folks who have considered these to be essential holiday viewing. So it's been fun for me to watch them and think a little more deeply about them, about why they elicit those feelings of sort of warmth and joy and satisfaction and a little bit of, not melancholy, but a twinge of, I don't know what the right word is. Maybe we'll find it by the end of this time. There's a twinge of awareness, of nostalgia, but for the future. Anyways, we'll think about that together. All right, just a reminder, we've been looking through these Christmas classics, these books and movies that have become secular Christmas gospels in their own way, and trying to draw out from them, not analogies necessarily to the Christmas story. Oh, well, the Grinch is Herod, and Cindy Lou Who is Jesus. We're not trying to do that. We're looking at it more from a thematic understanding of what do these stories have to teach us thematically that relate to our understanding of the Christmas story, and what that in turn teaches us about God and about Jesus and the nature of two of them. So you will not hear me trying to show you the secret reading of these various movies or books to show you how in which they are really Christian stories. They're not necessarily, but they do certainly hold those elements as a part of them. I'm going to give a little bit of a background about each of these stories, and then we'll dive into some analysis. We'll watch some clips, and we'll talk together. And I'm going to start with A Charlie Brown Christmas, because that comes first sequentially, chronologically, between the two. It came out in 1965, just 1 year before The Grinch came out as a movie. So good year for Christmas, good couple of years for Christmas specials as they started to emerge, and ties into the emergence of television as a sort of common medium in people's homes, and color television, sort of riding that wave. Charles Schulz, obviously, was the creator of the Peanuts comic strip, but he started that in 1950, so 15 years before. And it was enormously popular in print. Did anybody read that growing up, the Peanuts? Okay, good. So you knew just how popular it was. It was somewhat ubiquitous, but this Charlie Brown Christmas was the first movement of the comic strip into a television special. So there isn't some other Christmas, Charlie Brown Christmas television special out there. This is the first time. So the first time you hear the voices, the first time you see the characters moving, the first time you hear any music or anything associated with it. So as you're watching it, think this is it's become to us, that little theme song and those voices has become a part and parcel with the Peanuts characters. But in actuality, this was the first time people would have been hearing them voiced or actualized as well. And so Charles Schulz created it. He obviously was the illustrator for the comic strip, but Bill Melendez, he was the one who animated it. And they came up with the outline for it in a day, and then produced it in 6 months, which was a very tight timeline in those days for creating an animated TV special. And the reasons for that are somewhat complicated, but have to do with relationship with their sponsor, Coca-Cola, and they had all sorts of things where they needed to they were asked to do something, but they needed to do it by Monday, one of those great things. So it was like Thursday, and they had to get it all sorted out. So they came up with it, and that outline stayed more or less intact from the beginning. And one of the most controversial components of this was obviously that climactic scene with Linus, Charlie Brown searching for the meaning of Christmas, and Linus coming out and stepping out and saying, well, I'll tell you the meaning of Christmas. And then he quotes the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 8 through 14 in the King James Version in this little kid voice. It's highly effective, but it was somewhat controversial in that day and age for a secular, nominally secular, at least communal Christmas special to be so explicitly tied to the story of Jesus' birth. And we're going to watch that part of that scene, and we'll talk a little bit about the power that it has and the way in which we hear it as the way it is set up. Interesting, but Schultz, I mention this, Schultz insisted that be a part of it. That was not negotiable for him as a part of this Christmas special and this story. So know that. He sort of fought to keep it in when the corporate execs were saying, oh, can he say something else? They thought, after they made it, that it was going to be a disaster. They thought it was going to just bomb. They were like, you know what, we just didn't hit it. We just didn't get it. And so they were all prepared for that. And from the beginning, it was the exact opposite. It was immediately beloved and immediately sort of elevated into classic status from that year, pretty much all the way on. Now you have to pay for it. It's on Apple TV as opposed to being streamed on broadcast channels. But I think it's the 16th and 17th. It's available for free. You don't need an Apple TV subscription. But we've found our way around all that. No, I have the DVD. Yeah, so they thought it was going to be a disaster. It was the exact opposite. Remember, It's a Wonderful Life was a disaster for decades until it got picked up when the copyright expired, so it was able to be broadcast more generally. But in this case, it was different. And the soundtrack, the guy who wrote it, Vince Guaraldi, this is the only thing he ever composed for, these Peanuts movies and everything. But the soundtrack has been added to the Grammy Hall of Fame as one of the great sort of pieces of American music that has been created. And it is this sort of jazzy, somewhat atonal, funky little beat and tune going with it that now, again, is synonymous with Christmas, synonymous with the Peanuts, but was created specifically in this iteration of things. So that's Charlie Brown, some of the background there, and we'll watch it, we'll analyze it in a minute. But I'll move us to The Grinch. It's got some equally interesting backstory to it. It's by Dr. Seuss, obviously, Theodore Seuss Geisel. And he created in this story one of the most indelible characters. Charlie Brown already existed. The Grinch did not. Right, so Dr. Seuss, call him Dr. Seuss, created one of the most indelible characters of this Christmas season, a sort of modern-day Scrooge we talked about last week. And the name has, like Scrooge, become synonymous with this sort of Christmas crank, right? Someone who just is really grumpy about Christmas rather than getting in the spirit of things. It was published as a book in this sort of format in 1957. But it actually first came out under the title of The Hubbub and the Grinch in Red Book in 1955, as almost sort of like a short story. Interesting to think about the ways in which, Christmas Carol as well, and much of Dickens, this sort of serial publishing or sort of magazine short story publishing that then gets turned into, that sort of catches the public imagination and then gets turned into these classic works of literature. The character, he would say, then it was worked into a book over a couple of years and illustrated more fully, and then it became How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The character, he said, was based on himself. His wife had been having some significant health problems, his first wife, and he had found the commercialization of Christmas to be quite annoying, starting to annoy him. And so he asserted this in that 1957 edition of Red Book. So when the book came out, they did an interview about it in Red Book, and he said, I was brushing my teeth, quote, on the morning of the 26th of last December, when I noticed a very Grinchish countenance in the mirror. So I wrote about my sour friend, the Grinch, to see if I could rediscover something about Christmas that I'd obviously lost. So that was Dr. Seuss saying that. The movie version that we're going to watch, and that has become the classic Christmas movie, came out in 1966, so about 10 years after the original publication. It's narrated famously by Boris Karloff, and the song, that great song, is sung by Thurl Ravenscroft. I don't know why you need to know that. I just think it's a cool name. So, sung by Thurl Ravenscroft. He's our singer. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. We'll hear that song as well. It does embellish beyond the book. a little bit. There are times of sort of just music and activity. There's some text that is added. It needed to fill a 30-minute time slot, so they needed to expand a little bit and let everything breathe, let's say, and then added in some few lines, one of which are those final lines of the special, which we'll talk about after we watch them. It also needed to be in color, but the book is in, let me find it here, find a good example of this, is more or less in black and white with a couple of shades of red thrown in. So there is no green Grinch in the book. That was created for the TV special, right? So this idea that neon green, that sort of sickly green that the Grinch is and now has become so associated with, was created for the movie, not for the book. And that's when the Grinch became the Grinch. So, those are a little bit of background on both those stories. If you think of them together as a pair, 1965, 1966, as far as the movies, both stories are sort of about having lost the thread on Christmas and not really getting it and therefore disliking it. And so that means, sort of in an inverse way, the argument of each of these stories is how to rediscover the true meaning of Christmas, what it's really about. And for both of these, interestingly, the commercialization plays a part. And I think that was probably true with sort of the dawn of the, by the time you get into the 60s, the sort of solemnity of the 1950s, post-World War II, is starting to wear off a little bit, and the idea of commercialization and the chance to make money and capitalism sort of taking over things like religious holidays is starting to expand its reach. So I think there's some reason for that. They're also all about outsiders and insiders, and I would argue, and we'll see if you believe me or not by the end of this, about the redemptive and inclusive about the inclusive call to love that therefore becomes redemptive in terms of redeeming characters and their understanding of their role in the larger story, the Christmas story, the human story. So those are some themes there. We're going to start with Charlie Brown because it comes first, then we'll move to the Grinch. Summary, for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because you'll feel bad about yourself. But Charlie Brown is sort of opens it. Charlie Brown's feeling down. Charlie Brown is often feeling down. He's Charlie Brown. As Linus says to him in this movie, Charlie Brown, you're the only person I know who can turn a wonderful season like Christmas and turn it into a problem. He feels like he should be happy. So there's that sense of should, which is always an interesting thing to interrogate. This sense of should, it's Christmas, I should be happy, but I'm not. And he tries various things. He goes to Lucy for psychiatric help, right? And then that gets him invited to direct the Christmas play, but no one listens to him, and so it only further sort of demeans him and makes him feel like a loser. And then he goes to get the Christmas tree, but he famously gets this wimpy dud of a tree, and everyone makes fun of him. So that makes him feel even more like a loser. So it just compounds, right? He compounds negatively. It doesn't go up. It makes him sort of pushes him lower and lower and lower. And this is true. This is sort of the character, right, of Charlie Brown through the whole Peanut special, but here specifically related to Christmas. He's always on the outside somewhat of that group of friends, even though they're always together. And he's always the loser. He doesn't feel like he's a part of things or that there's anything in it for him in any given circumstance. And this is juxtaposed with these kids who are having fun in this season, right? Lucy's busy running around with the play, Schroeder's playing the piano, and everybody's dancing like this. And then they go, Sally is writing this ambitious Christmas letter where she says, please note the size and color of each item. And, if this is too complicated, just send cash. Please use 10s and 20s, things like that. And we were watching it with the boys. They say, what does that mean? And I said, it'd be like asking for like $100 bills. They're like, you can do that? So we opened that door. Even Snoopy is sort of betraying man's best friend, as he often does, betraying Charlie Brown, in this case, sort of giving in to the commercialization and decking out his little doghouse with this elaborate, gaudy display of lights. So everybody's into it, but in this sort of superficial way. And Charlie Brown's melancholy is somewhat isolating. But so too, I think, is his desire for something deeper and more impactful than what everybody else is experiencing. And then we get the turn that happens, and that's what we're going to watch. And the turn happens with the tree. He's instructed to get the biggest aluminum tree you can find. Now, this was news to me. Did any of you grow up with aluminum Christmas trees? Frank? So this was a thing. I mean, I looked this up. This was really a thing. There was like a big movement away from natural Christmas trees. Now we have a lot of other fake Christmas trees, but we'll save our ire for that, a modern-day Christmas special. But the idea that there was sort of an aluminum Christmas tree was sort of even better than a natural tree, right? Far less mess, but Schultz is picking up on that and playing with it, obviously. But he doesn't come back with an aluminum Christmas tree. He finds this wimpy little dud of a Christmas tree, and everyone laughs at him. And then this happens. Jamie, you want to bring it up here?
We're back. Boy, are you stupid, Charlie Brown. What kind of a tree is that? You were supposed to get a good tree. Can't you even tell a good tree from a poor tree? I told you we'd goof it up. He's not the kind you can depend on to do anything right. You're hopeless, Charlie Brown. Completely hopeless. Rats. You've been dumb before, Charlie Brown, but this time you really did it. What a tree. I guess you were right, Linus. I shouldn't have picked this little tree. Everything I do turns into a disaster. I guess I really don't know what Christmas is all about. Isn't there anyone who knows what Christmas is all about? Sure, Charlie Brown. I can tell you what Christmas is all about. Lights were. And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night, and lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them. The glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God, and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. Behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Linus is right. I won't let all this commercialism ruin my Christmas. I'll take this little tree home and decorate it, and I'll show them it really will work in our plan. well, this commercial dog is not going to ruin my Christmas. I've killed him. Oh, everything I touch gets ruined. I never thought it was such a bad little tree. It's not bad at all, really. Maybe it just needs a little love. Charlie Brown is a blockhead, but he did get a nice tree. What's going on here? Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown! Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and reconciled.
Everything changes. Like the whole tenor of the movie changes, right, in that moment. It's like the turn in a poem or like some great twist in a novel or something, right? Everyone's countenance changes, and it comes at that lowest moment where the kids are the meanest to Charlie Brown, and he's just, I'm not going to be able, I just don't get it. I just don't get what Christmas is all about. I'm trying, and I'm trying, and I'm failing, and I'm failing. And then Linus steps forward and fascinatingly drops his blanket, which he always has, right? There's a certain amount of security and reassurance in what he's saying, and he stands and delivers. And if you remember back a few scenes earlier, he says, no way I'm ever going to be able to learn this. These are too many lines. And he delivers it, and those worn words spoken in this child's voice have a power that obviously reaches each one of those characters, but reaches, well, I'll speak for myself, reaches right into my heart as well. And you think about, then what is it there? This lame tree, this Linus reciting the story, and behold, there were shepherds abiding in the fields, the angels show up, and all of a sudden the way they see the world, everyone sees the world, the way they see that tree changes. Never really thought it was that bad of a tree. Charlie Brown is a blockhead, but he did choose a nice tree. And all the anger and the spite and the vitriol that was coming his way turns into a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown, and they all start singing together. And tellingly, Linus, who continues to be the prophet of the movie, says, I never thought it was such a bad little tree. All it needs is just a little love. And to be seen with eyes of love for the potential that it has. And that, to me, is where this becomes a Christmas movie. Right? It happens at Christmas time, but that's where the story becomes a Christmas story. Because you can make a pretty convincing argument that the way in which God saw us was as pretty dumpy, lame little trees, having been separated or at distance from our roots and from our home, and said, instead of, what an awful, terrible tree, I think they just need a little love, to be shown their full potential and to be seen with those eyes, with that lens, so that they can understand their own potential as beloved, right? The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Linus here reminds us in that story, in those words, of that supreme gift. For behold, unto you is born this day in the city of David, unto you is born this day a Savior who is Christ the Lord. And all of a sudden, the way people look at the world, the way they value each other and the world changes. And that is the work of Jesus Christ when Jesus comes, to change the way we view the world and give us a lens of love to be able to see potential and value and beauty and worth even in the lamest of things, even in those things we have been told are stupid or outcast or alone or dumb, all those words that get thrown around here. And Charlie Brown, obviously, sort of analogized to the tree, gets that same treatment as he comes through. Lift up the lowly, comfort the downtrodden, include the excluded. This is the mission of God in the world as exhibited in Jesus Christ, and that work begins at Christmas. Coming into a lowly place, a lame place, kind of a stupid place if you want to get a good message out into the world. And that place is the most blessed and the most beautiful in that night. I'm going to move us on, Nancy, and we're going to come back to questions at the end, but I do want to get us to the Grinch. Okay, go ahead, say it quickly.
I said the tree kind of parallels the humbleness of Christ.
Yes, yes. And literally, even, this may be pushing things a bit too far, but sort of even in the bending to touch the earth, right, with the bulb on it, it's in that moment that it's shown its fullest potential. Is say, oh, I ruined it. Actually, that's when we see, wait, what could this become? And they straighten it up and give it a little bit of love, and there you go. All right. So that's Charlie Brown. If we have time at the end, we'll come back for other thoughts and questions, but I'm going to move us on to the Grinch. All right? Summary: the Grinch hates Christmas and hatches a plan to steal it by becoming what I call Anti-Claus instead of Santa Claus. He's taking away all the presents and the decorations, and yet, wonderfully, this does not dissuade the Who's in Whoville, and in experiencing that resiliency, the Grinch is transformed and becomes then the Christmas hero. There's something of a mystery of his hatred for Christmas. The text even says no one quite knows the reason. But he does note quickly, for 53 years I've put up with it now. So there's something about a sense of distance and isolation for what sounds like most of the Grinch's life that he has experienced. And I'll go back to things I have preached before, but to say the idea of isolation, and this is C.S. Lewis too, right, is hell. Of being at a distance or a remove or cut off from other people is hell. The importance of relationships. C.S. Lewis, hell is the state we create for ourselves when we shut ourselves up in the dungeon of our own mind. And that isolation does start to poison us. Remember back to a sermon I preached and things I've written, I think it was last spring in Lent, about this Harvard study they're doing about the power of relationships. The number one indicator of outcomes, of health outcomes in one's life, is not how much exercise, not your diet, not whether you smoked or not, but the power of your relationships. Do you have loving relationships in your life? A spouse, a friend, someone that you can turn to so that you are not alone. And that to me becomes a very important, I would say essential component of our existence as human beings. And the Grinch is at the opposite end of that. He is all alone. He's got Max, but doesn't seem to be quite the level of companion he needs. And that isolation literally poisons us to death. And you can see that. It poisons the soul of the Grinch. And there's a certain, maybe I'm reading into it too much, tell me if I am, but it seems to be there's a certain longing for that warmth and that love that the Who's just sort of have, that he can see, but from afar. And that, very often, for all of us, a longing for something we somehow cannot have, we turn into hate, so as to protect us from the pain of not having the thing. And we say, I don't really want it anyways. It's stupid. I don't even like it. And he says that, and he says, could not stand all the noise, right? All the noise. Seuss repeats it over and over again. But what is the noise? The noise is kids playing with toys. The noise is people feasting at a table all together. The noise is singing as a choir. All things that he is not a part of. So yes, the noise may be annoying, but I think there's something else within that noise that is pouring salt in whatever wound it is that he has feeling about that distance and that isolation. How often do we long for something so much that instead of being willing to feel the pain of that longing, we shut it off and manifest it as hate so as not to feel it at all? And Jesus, coming to reconcile humankind to God, also comes to reconcile humankind to one another. Right? Like we said with Charlie Brown, with that Christmas tree, it's a bringing in, to bring people together, particularly people in the edges who have been ostracized or pushed out, and to restore them into the community. This is a central Christian act. His birth begins that, bringing the shepherds in from the fields, bringing the wise men from afar. He exerts a certain sort of gravitational pull in his orbit that draws people to his light. Another thing we hear about the Grinch is that his heart is 2 sizes too small, right? And this idea of hardness of heart, or the shrinking of one's heart, is a scriptural idea, a scriptural phase. And it is, again, in my mind, the way in which isolation can poison our souls. Distance, you might say, makes for disgust. And Jesus is doing the opposite of that in the incarnation. Jesus is coming close and reducing distances between God and people and people and people. And that to me is an essential Christian thing. Now, the grossness of the Grinch's soul is fullest on display in that scene in the house where Cindy Lou Who shows up and talks to him, and he just sort of lies to this kid's face. He's ruined her Christmas. He's impersonating Santa. And then you get this song, which is a wonderful song in terms of its lyrics. So Jamie, why don't we play that for a little while? We may not watch the full thing just to give ourselves enough time, but we'll give ourselves the beginning of it at least. But this is him in the midst of stealing Christmas, and we'll get a sense of just what a rotten person he is.
The old winky claws hissed as he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight fix, but if Santa could do it then, so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a minute or two. Then he stuck his head out to the fireplace flue where the little Who stockings hung all in a row. These stockings he Grinch are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present: popguns, pampoolers, pantouflas and drums, checkerboards, thistledoos, popcorn and plums, and he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney.
You're a foul one, Mr. Grinch. Still have mermaids in your smile. You have all the tender sweetness of a seasick crocodile, Mr. Grinch. Given the choice between the two of you, I'd take the seasick crocodile. You're a rotter, Mr. Grinch. You're the king of sinful spots. You're a heart so detrimental, clutched with moldy purple spots, Mr. Grinch. You're a three-decker sauerkraut, old school sandwich with arsenic sauce.
Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. Cleaned out the icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of food. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. Now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. As the Grinch took the tree, as he started to shout, he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small who, little Cindy Lou, who was no more than 2. She stared at the Grinch and said,
Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?
but you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought of a lie, he thought it a hook. My sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head and he got her a drink and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who was in bed with her cup, he crept to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar, and the last thing he took was to log for their fire. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse.
All right, Jamie, let's cut it there. Thank you. All right, so he goes on and does the same thing from there. So this is sort of the nadir, the low moment in the Grinch's behavior, just lying to this little kid's face and ruining her Christmas and impression of Santa Claus and all that. But it leads in just a couple of minutes to this conversion moment where he thinks he has now sufficiently ruined Christmas, he has stolen it, and therefore everyone will be bemoaning the lack of presents and toys and things like that, but in fact they are not, right? He's listening to it, and the Who's are singing, and they're singing their nonsense song, but it's a joyous song, a happy song, and this is completely befuddling to him, because he has attached the meaning to Christmas, obviously, to these external things rather than these internal things. And so this chance to be together, he says, well, maybe Christmas, ultimately. Stood there 3 hours and puzzled till his puzzler would soar. Stood there 3 hours and he said, how could it be, et cetera, et cetera. He says, maybe Christmas, he said, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, he says, means a little bit more. Melt the cold-hearted, soften the hard-hearted, increase our compassion by being willing and able to open our minds and hearts to others. This is one of the most important transformation that we are called to, the expansion, the growth of our heart in Jesus and the work of the Holy Spirit. Caring about people we don't care about. Understanding people we don't understand. And this is, I asked my youngest, I said, well, I have to teach on the Grinch. We were reading it this week. I said, I have to tell people what we learn about God from this story. I said, what do you think we do? And he said, well, I think, this is Arthur, it's easy. He says, God can grow your heart. And so this idea then of the Grinch's heart growing 3 sizes that day, and then him all of a sudden being melted and turned into this character who understands, let's call it the true meaning of Christmas, or just the true meaning of what it means to be a human being, which is, again, what God is trying to show us in the human being, the one who comes to show us that love and compassion and kindness and relationship are central to that. So we're going to watch just the last bit. Jamie, why don't you bump ahead a little bit to just the last couple minutes, because I want to hear that last line. So jump a little bit, actually jump to the middle of that, pull us forward just because we have time there. So he's up at the top of the hill. He wants to hear their pain and their sorrow, their wails and weeping coming. But then they're singing, and all of a sudden he's getting melted. And there we go. Let's start right there, Jamie, and take it from there.
Just the same. And the Grinch with his Grinch feet, ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. What happened then? What did who will they say? That the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And then the true meaning of Christmas came through, and the Grinch found the strength of 10 Grinches, thus too. And now that his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, with a smile in his soul, he descended Mount Comfort, cheerily blowing hoo-hoo on his trumpet. He rode in a Whoville, he brought back their toys, he brought back their fruit to the Who girls and boys. He brought back their Snoop and their Trindlers and puzzles, brought back their Pantookas, their Dapplers and Wuzzles. He brought everything back, all the food for the feast. He himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Welcome, Christmas. Bring your
not in the book, but added
cheer
in.
to all homes, far and near. Christmas Day is in our grasp, so long as we have hands to clasp. Christmas Day will always be just as long as we have you. Welcome Christmas while we stand, heart to heart, and hand in hand.
All right, thank you, Jamie. We'll stop it there just to conclude here. Christmas Day is in our grasp so long as we have hands to clasp. Christmas Day will always be just as long as we have we. A great Seussian turn of phrase at the end there that for him, he said he was struggling how to get the end of this movie or this end of this book together. What is the resolution for him? And it may not be as explicitly Christian as Charles Schulz was, but I would say in essence it is, right? This sense of we, this sense of so long as we have hands to clasp and people to love and to love us, we are understanding the essence of what Jesus came to teach us in the incarnation. So to me, that becomes an essential Christmas movie. So in conclusion, 2 brilliant stories by certified masters of children's literature who always, in all their work, find a way to weave important messages in. And in this case, the message is one of profound recovery of the power of the Christmas story of using love to bring people together, to save people, and to heal and grow our hearts and our understanding of what this season is about and what then our lives should be about and what is required of us. That is, to me, some of the deeper meanings, messages of these 2 very fun stories, and why, for me, they are 2 must-haves on my Christmas list. All right, so that's all I have. Thank you very much. We're right at 10 o'clock, so we don't have time for questions, and I'm sorry for that, but we do have time to transition over the church, I will just say next week we conclude with Elf and Rudolph. So more understandings of ostracization and inclusion in the Christmas world. So Jared will be leading us through that. Thank you guys. This has been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you.